Good evening, and welcome to Dante's Old South. My name is Clifford Brooks, and for tonight's show, we have a phenomenal lineup of prose writers, poets, philosophers, and musicians. They're all going to share their ideas and their passions and their thoughts on how the world of letters is actually getting better. I can't thank you enough for once again coming out to listen to us pontificate on those things that we hope are equally as important to you as they are to us. Thank you. And first, we have Mr. Clayton Ramsey, who I met maybe a year ago. And over about a period of 6 months, I finally wore him down to join the Southern Collective Experience. And today, he is here to share some flash fiction with us. How are you, Clayton?
Very well. Thank you, Clifford. It's a real privilege to be here.
Well, brother, no one here has heard you on the radio, so do us a favor and, so Clayton, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Certainly. I grew up in Atlanta. I went to college up north and studied overseas for a little bit, came back and finished a graduate degree, and now I work with a medical research team. During the day and at night and on the weekends, I indulge my love of books and writing.
Where do you see the world of letters going, the books, and as far as fiction? People worried about, that the book's becoming obsolete, and so is the author. Do you cleave to that? Are you afraid of it? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, certainly the media might be changing. It definitely is changing, and the means by which stories are told is changing. I mean, the publishing industry, for instance, in the past 5 or 10 years has really shifted dramatically. On one hand, it's easier to get your work available to the general public, but it's still there's still traditional routes that are very difficult, I think, to break into. But stories aren't going anywhere. We've been telling stories to each other as a species for thousands of years, and we'll continue to do so as long as we continue on this planet.
I couldn't agree more. But people get so afraid that the digital world will somehow take over the print world, and you have to sit back and chuckle a little because, as you said, it doesn't exclude people from your work. It actually allows you to have more access to more people, and in a medium that they're acquainted with. Where have you been published lately or in the past that really just sang to you and still do?
I've been writing for years. Really, I was an English literature major in college, and so words and books and literature have always been a very important part of my life. But I really started to write in earnest about 11 years ago when I joined the Atlanta Writers Club. And since then, I've written 3 novels, a novella, dozens of short stories, dozens of essays that I wrote when I was president of the Atlanta Writers Club. And recently, I've been working on some nonfiction pieces for Georgia Backroads, and specifically the historic rural churches of Georgia feature that they have. And that's been a real treat for me, to be honest. I love historical mysteries. I love sort of sifting through mountains of information and tracking down leads and trying to reconstruct what happened in the past in order to preserve it for the future.
And I believe that's where I actually became acquainted with your work. And my mom, by the way, gives you 2 big thumbs up when she saw your name there in Georgia Backroads.
Well, thank you.
You at least have one huge fan, and trust me, I think she put you in the wheel, so we're set.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So let's not keep the public waiting, brother. Why don't you share what you got today?
Sure. This is a piece of short fiction, very short fiction that they call flash fiction, 750 words, called The Assistant. It was shortlisted by MASH Stories a couple of years ago. The characters are absolutely historical. The places are historical, but the story itself is entirely fictitious, and I think it's probably a good story for the Halloween season. So again, this is The Assistant. Escaping the fog that shrouded central London, John slipped in the Fortune of War public house, wrapped in a woolen cape, the hood covering his face. He found a table in the shadows, ordered a flagon, and waited. He was not ignorant of the pub's commerce. His success depended on it, but the messy business end was new to him. He usually sent representatives to take possession in exchange for coin, but tonight he had been promised something, or rather someone, special. "You, John," the man hissed, emerging from a dim corner. John nodded and followed the man deeper still. There were no tables, no drinking, no laughter, just benches along the walls. On each bench, a body. The ghost of a man walked over to a long, lumpy bag. He untied the cord and pulled the canvas sides down until they bunched at the feet of a corpse. The resurrectionist turned to John and smiled crooked, lamplight dancing across his broken teeth. Good? He asked. John stared at the pale body, plump with excess, flabby in death. He looked with the expert eye of a master anatomist. Pull the sack down a little further. John leaned in to examine the face, the feet, then the face again. Are you certain? Absolutely, Governor. 20 guineas? Make it 30. That's highway robbery, John said. Grave robbery, in truth. John had no choice. This was an investment. He fished a purse from his pocket. Clothes included? Surely I paid for the waistcoat and breeches of a man of fashion, John said. Nope. Dug him up, yanked him out with the rope, tossed his fancy clothes back in. Gold watch and ring, too, the man said. Goes harder with the law if we keep 'em. Next day, the body was on the dissection table in the packed surgical theater of Bart's, covered with clean linen. John had been lecturing for 3 decades as assistant surgeon. He was popular and authoritative, drawing large crowds, but he was still assistant to Sir Charles. Of the hundreds in attendance, John only cared about him, his mentor, his master, his one impediment. The body on the table was his plan to correct that injustice. Before he threw back the sheet, Sir Charles looked indifferent. He had seen thousands of dissections, mostly executed felons, some poor, others increasingly stolen, in spite of iron cages and vigilant relatives. With a yank of cloth, John exposed the body of a criminal, angry scars around each ankle, evidence of shackled years. Sir Charles looked furious, frightened, as he stared at the face of the cadaver. Brother, he whispered. A burial befitting their ancient family was his last glimpse of that face. John cut, lecturing only about anatomy. He could have given a presentation on genealogy, but he did not. He let Sir Charles ruminate. Following a conversation the next morning, a quiet retirement, and John's elevation to principal. The body had done its work, as John had done his.
Clayton, brother, that without an ounce of false pontification, you have a gift.
Well, thank you. You're kind.
I cannot thank you enough for being a part of this show, and I think that I'll have you back.
I look forward to that. Thank you very much, Clifford.
All right, brother. And next up at bat is a returning guest, Marcia Cornelius. Marcia, as I understand it, you have a new book coming out. Could you tell us something about that?
I sure do. The new book is called Into the Pond, and it's the second in a series. The first book was called Up to No Good. It came out last year. It's about a woman who's kind of a busybody and her husband. And in the first book, they thought that a rental house down the road was being used to make amateur adult videos. In this book, in Into the Pond, she finds out that some woman drove her car into a pond and drowned. Now, this isn't like a pond like a lake. This is a pond like the retention pond you'd see out in front of a subdivision with that little water spurting out of the top. It's maybe 5 or 6 feet deep. Why? How could you drown in this little pond? So Rachel and Brian are trying to solve the mystery of why this woman drowned. So it's the second in this new series.
And since you mentioned that, that leads to my next question. Is it harder to write books in a series, or what's the challenges behind taking on a project that large?
Well, it's something that I never considered that I thought was really hard was keeping up the humor. Because the first book, there's some really funny scenes. So when I'm writing the second book, I have all this self-doubt, like, oh, this isn't as funny as the first one. It's like the classic movie sequel, and everybody says, oh, it wasn't as good as the first one. So all the time I'm writing it, I'm worried about, is it going to be as funny? And of course, I still don't know because it's not out till December, so we'll see. So that was kind of the hard part. The easy part is you already have your characters, you already have a backstory, so now all you really have to come up with is a new mystery.
As you answer again, to almost lead into my next question, what in your series makes your books different from what people are maybe used to or want to pigeonhole the whole genre of the mystery novel. What sets you apart from the others?
Right. And it's actually a cozy mystery. And there's tons of those out. And a lot of them are humorous. So they all follow some sort of a pattern. There's certainly a set way that you write a cozy mystery. So I couldn't do anything much different there. I couldn't change the humor. But what I could sort of change was I decided to take some little pokes at romance books because women love to read romance. And of course, in a romance, a man and a woman first meet, and he's rich and he's sexy and she's gorgeous and smart, and their whole relationship is this volatile, torrid, can't keep their hands off each other. Well, Brian and Rachel have been married for 15 years. So their marriage is getting pretty stale. What they did discover in the first book is that when they were out investigating and they got in trouble, that adrenaline kind of worked as a little aphrodisiac. So it did kind of spark their relationship. But still, the scenes are much more realistic. The thing about romance is that they're so unrealistic. Like, here's an example. Sex in the shower. Now, in a romance book, oh boy, it's hot and steamy, right? In real life, has anyone ever successfully pulled off sex in the shower without ripping that curtain off those rings or knocking that sliding door off its track?
I doubt it.
I doubt it too. And so in my books, I'm looking at a much more realistic, and some women, I get some bad reviews because women really want their romance dreamy, but that's not me.
Well, let's get a taste of that new book, and have you read a little bit of it now?
Oh, sure. Okay, and this is not the shower scene. Rachel is trying to figure out why this woman drowned in the pond. And when she read the obituary in the newspaper, she saw that this woman attended this church. So Rachel's going to go to the church a little bit early and see if anybody is hanging around before the service to talk about this woman who drowned. So she gets to the service early, and sure enough, there's a table with the coffee urn and people huddled around it. So she approaches the group. Two men are talking about the Braves' chances this season. A woman wearing a Kelly green sweater tells a friend about the corned beef and cabbage she made for St. Patrick's Day. Then I hear, my cousin said a deer ran into the side of her car so she couldn't get the door open. I rise up on my toes to see who said that. There's a small huddle of women at the end of the table near a tray of pastries. I heard she hit a tree first and was knocked unconscious, someone else says. A sourpuss with red lipstick oozing into the wrinkles around her mouth says she may have been drinking. I insinuate myself into the group, Deborah Wiley. They turn to look at me with blank expressions on their face. That was her name, I say, Deborah Wiley. I've been in the middle of this kind of mob action before. No one really knew her, but since she was a member of the church, they have a connection. And they all want to appear to know more about her than they do. Even if it's someone really famous, people grasp at any link to them. My brother-in-law used to fly to Chicago all the time, and that's where Robin Williams was born. Stuff like that. And I ought to know because I'm a master of deception. When no one takes my challenge, I add another morsel. She was our newspaper carrier. A few heads bob in admiration, but I also get a couple of doubtful smirks. I think about tossing in the fact that we gave her $25 every Christmas, but some of these folks might think I'm a cheapskate. At least I've upped the ante. Someone will have to do better than the fact that Deborah Wiley touched the newspaper I read. She worked at a fitness center, too, a woman off to the side says. Bingo, we have a contender. Yeah, a personal trainer, I say. She was really buff, wasn't she? Now it's like a championship tennis match. The two with the most knowledge will battle it out to see who comes up with the stumper. The rest of the huddle becomes onlookers who follow the volleys back and forth. No kidding, the woman says. I wish I could wear a size 2. Oh, nice return. It's a high lob that goes over my head. The crowd gasps at this intimate detail, but I've got it. With a strong backhand, I come up with a doozy. I wonder how her boyfriend is handling the loss. Point Rachel. By the expression on the woman's face, she had no idea Deborah was in a relationship.
Marcia Cornelius. When does this book come out again?
December of this year. So you actually have 2 months to read Up to No Good before Into the Pond is out. Just a little tip for you, Cliff.
You make my job so easy. Thank you so much for coming out today.
And thanks for having me.
Awesome. And now we have the honor of Mr. Mario Reyes, who I met fairly recently. And when I heard his poetry, the lyricism of it dances along the line between music and what we consider straight poetry. Mario, thank you for being here today, man.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm native of the Bronx, New York, from the Northeast Bronx, Co-op City to be exact. I am from a true community called Q4. I'd like to give a shout out to all my peoples over there. Spent my first 18 years of life there, being entertained by such things as graffiti, breakdancing, and all the things that you would enjoy as a child throughout the 80s and 90s. Then I would join the Air Force, and I spent 6 years in the intelligence field in the Air Force where they taught me everything I needed to know about technology. I got my bachelor's in science and my master's in nonprofit and association management via their generous offerings of the Montgomery GI Bill. And I turned that into a IT company that I started in 2007. So since then, I've been an independent IT contractor.
From your background in IT and seeing how the business end of the job goes, you've come up and created and established a trademark and branding in a concept that's truly you, and I have to hit upon that. Could you tell us something about that?
Well, thank you. In IT and in the intelligence community, it's a fairly small community. So your reputation will speak volumes before you even get to open up your mouth. And I wanted to bring that same level of confidence that I was able to instill in all of my customers to poetry. And I've been writing since I was 15. First time I heard Capone and Noriega's Take Over New York, I just started writing. But back then it was rap. And I was a horrible rapper because I don't know how to count bars. So I would just ramble and put way too many words in the bars. It was horrible. And eventually, like most people, I started doing poetry to impress a woman. And when I was in Hampton, and she went to Hampton University, I was stationed at Langley Air Force Base. Since then, I've garnered a following behind not just what I do, but why I do it. So that's what was important for me in the branding capacity, to let them know that the words that I'm speaking aren't trying to play on anybody's desire for vanity, but more these are honest words that I'm speaking, and I hope that you could relate to them. So the brand Poppy Picasso, which is trademarked, and my brand name and my stage name, Poppy Picasso Poetry, is all about shattering stereotypes and typecasts. There is no definition for my disposition. The people I worked with in the government thought that I was a thug. My friends on the block, they think that I'm a sellout. So there's this line in the middle where most of us live, this gray area that your fickle labels cannot stick to us. We break all the expectations you have of what a Puerto Rican from the Bronx is supposed to be. I could be articulate and show the same amount of respect to everybody. And I think that's what's been able to push the brand to 7,500 on Instagram, a couple thousand on Facebook. And I just started taking this seriously, and it's simply because I'll be as vulnerable and transparent as possible without a problem.
And it's that honesty that makes people connect. The minute that your faults are try to pretend to be something you're not, people will literally laugh and walk away. And when you stand up there, there's no facade and there's no thumbing in the eye. It's just the beauty of the work and the strength of the man.
I tell people all the time, just because I wear my heart on my sleeve doesn't mean I'm gonna give you my shirt. Like, I will bear all my vulnerability, but you can't use it against me. And you just because you're able to relate to it, and I hope that you relate to my lessons as much as you relate to my pain, doesn't mean that you now have leverage.
Well, let's jump waist deep into that redefinition and have you read some of your work, man.
Well, I'll be happy to share my flagship poem entitled I Am a Man. And as you can tell, that title is very self-defining. So, just so you know, I start every poem out with Ayo. Now, Ayo could take on varying meanings. This is just a way that I establish my dominance where I'm at. So when I say Ayo, you got to say I. Call and response from the 80s. Not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's going down today, okay?
Yes, sir.
Ayo. I am a man. But I want you guys to understand I'm talking about a man's man. A mother's boy, a father's pride, a woman's goddamn. A daughter's template, my son's architect. I am God's hands. I'm labor intensive, just not in that unit. I'm taken for granted whenever I do it. I'm taking for granted you hear in today's music presented as if I'm supposed to be a buffoon, incapable and foolish. I am past mistakes, lessons acquired, accountable for myself, absent of excuses. I am a man that's claiming his dignity at the risk of sounding hubris, because if I don't do this, then our Sermon on the Mount may as well be muted. Shh. I've been mistaken for examples on reality TV. But as I just said, I am a man, and I don't see that reality in me. I'm of the tribe of injustice. My absence speaks louder than my presence. This is why I do not shy when I'm out in public. If anything, I try to shine as a beacon above this new age that puts so much value in complaint. I am a man that will no longer mask his masculinity because it might be conveyed as vain, but do not get me twisted. My power requires no praise. I am a man, the pillar of the pack, the leader of the pack, the cornerstone of the family that withstands every crack. I am a man that will happily take a bullet for your child, because cornerstones of manhood are empathy and humanity. I am a man that nods his head in understanding. I love hard. I hate apathy. I build self-esteem while I'm raising my family. I am a man that bears his responsibilities on his shoulders until they strangle his neck. I am a man that pays all debts, and I expect a return on my investment when I pay the proper respect. I am Sir. I am not your nigger. I'm not your dude. I'm not your stereotype, and I'm certainly not your lie. I am truth. I am virtue. I am principle. I am important, baby girl. I said I am life. I am direction. I am destined. I am that man that rubs her belly while pregnant, and I proudly tell the world I did this. I'm not extinct. Nah, never that. Matter of fact, I am distinguished. I am one of the many, the voice for our quiet leadership. I am a man that will not be told that his definition is meaningless by any bitter woman fed up with who she dealt with previous. Sorry, baby, I'm not your mistake. I am unapologetic for poor decisions you made. You see, he and I, oh, we are not the same. I am dominant. I am prominent. I am confident. I am not that misogynist that looks at your body as his conquest. I am a man with a daughter and a conscience. Therefore, my character will always be more important than my accomplishments. I am a man that is important. I am not famous. I am brazen. I am not jaded. I am broader than the picture they all painted. You see, I make sense. I manifest potential in which every man could. you're not just looking at a man, but this right here, it's the redefinition of manhood. Thank you.
No, we start out with an I, but we have to end with amen.
But
Amen.
Ashe,
Amen.
there we go.
Man, I cannot thank you enough for this, man. It's right at the perfect time to bring the juice and the life back to this show, brother. I cannot thank you enough, man.
Come on, please. I'm from the Bronx, baby. We walking batteries in the back. That's what we do. You gotta keep that energy going at all times. I tell my son, the world is as big as your circumference. If you hold down your square, that's all you have to do anywhere in this world. And the only way you could do that is to ensure that you have a battery on standby in your back. Because something will happen to challenge you.
I'm glad to not have to be the one that's a live wire all the time. I can actually take a breath and sit back at this point, man. I cannot thank you enough for being on this show.
I tell you seriously, I keep a jump rope in the back of my truck just so that way when there's downtime, I just do jump ropes and knock out a quick 50 push-ups real quick. That's just everywhere I go, I have to do that and keep that on standby. There's too much energy in me.
I just end up sweating a whole lot and smoking half a pack of cigarettes. Yeah. You have much better habits than me, man. That's right. But I can't thank you enough.
I tell you like my Theo Julio told me, I just make it look easy.
And that's where the delicate genius is. Man, I cannot thank you enough for coming out today, brother.
Oh, most definitely. What I do enjoy is the level of geekdom that's going through my pores right now. I'll give you a quick anecdote. I used to drive from Baltimore City to Baltimore County to drop my kids off at school to D.C., a minimum of 2 hours in traffic each way, and reverse to get back to school, get back home, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole time I would listen to NPR. So now as a sustaining member to be even in the vicinity or in the building where this is hosted makes me feel genuinely like giddy, like, I'm excited. This is like being on High 97 to me.
Bringing church to church.
Word up. Yeah,
man. Yeah, dude. Well, we're going to definitely have you back, brother. And as a member of the Southern Collective Experience, I'm honored to have you on board.
I appreciate that, sir.
All right.
My man.
And now we're sitting down with Miss Jennifer Avery. How are you, young lady?
I'm doing all right, Clifford. How are you?
I am good. We have known each other since 1996.
I think so.
And you still claim me as a friend.
Oddly enough, I do. Yeah.
Miracles never cease. What's going on in your world today?
Well, we have had an excellent day, I think, Clifford. Hanging out with some fellow artists and writers and talking about writing and life, and it's just the best way to possibly spend a day, in my opinion. We showed up at 9:30 this morning and thought, oh my God, how are we going to fill all this downtime? And this was one of those days that blink, and here we are at 4. Here we are at 4.
What are some exciting things going on in your world?
I am still on the Noetic site for Luke Johnson, who's coming up apparently, and I've been doing Pride and Prejudice with him, a discussion, and I also have Jane Eyre. This is done, even though it's 20 episodes long. And I've been working on my book, and I'm trying to put together a chapbook for Ghost Shadow Press.
Yes, it's almost a feat of Olympic triumph to watch the evolution of you finally coming out of your shell and admitting, 1, yes, you can write, and 2, it's done, you're going to do it. And to be able to not give, but just to stand and say, I was there, for me is something that's of a deep respect. And words that I hope will stick the next time I make you angry and you won't punch me in the face. So with this new book, you have some of that with you today, right?
I do.
Well, why don't you share that with us?
Okay. Well, this is from the book I've been working on lately called The Art of Calm. That's the working title. This is a scene in which my main character, Steve, is he lives in a bigger city, and he's come home to the country to kind of hang out with some of his family members. And this is him with his brothers. They have just done a guitar circle, which is basically where people just sit around in a circle and hang out and play guitars and jam. And now they're kind of taking a break, and he's sitting on the porch and talking to his brothers. So after a few compliments on the music, some more well wishes, and a couple pats on the back, Steve disengaged himself from the throng to find solitude on the back porch of the main house. He sank onto a porch swing and lit a cigarette. He was exhausted, but at least there was no hitch in his chest and no tremor in his hand. The memory of his workday faded as if it were from another life, and he managed to smile with something like contentment. He gazed deep into the woods behind the house, watching the clumsy dance of lightning bugs to empty his mind. A cool breeze cut through the dense summer humidity, bringing the scent of pine and rhododendron to his nostrils. He closed his eyes to let the sound of crickets and cicadas join the great symphony of home as he smiled to himself in blissful reverie. He'd finished his cigarette and enjoyed a good 10 minutes of solitude and peace when heavy boots stomped up the porch steps and settled in front of him. He didn't open his eyes for a moment, but grinned. "What's up, my brothers?" He opened his eyes to see a wall of Larsons looking down on him in mingled concern and amusement. "Thanks for giving me a few minutes before the Inquisition, fellers." "We do what we can, baby brother," Marty answered as he leaned against the porch railing. Keith chuckled and sat beside Steve on the porch swing. "A bit of a crowd for you, ain't it, Ezra?" "A bit," Steve answered, "but it's good to be home. Glad to see Maddie and Elise in town." "Elise moved back, you know," Keith said, "so I hear." Marty chuckled. Old Buddy Rasta was pretty pleased about that. Steve chuckled at Marty's name for Terrence, inspired by his Jamaican heritage and dreadlocks. "Yeah, I don't think I ever seen him smile so much." "Too bad Lynn ain't here," Keith sighed. "Otherwise we'd have the whole gang." Marty shot Keith a look. Steve barely caught it, but he could have sworn it was a warning look. He dismissed it. "Do y'all ever hear from her?" "No, Ezra, can't say as we have. Not for a long while now," Marty answered after another fleeting glance at Keith. Steve lit another cigarette and sighed. "I hope she's doing okay. I worry about her out there." Keith clapped him on the back. "You worry too much, Ezra. No wonder you look like hell. Anyway, Lynn's a tough girl. I bet she's having a ball up yonder. Now weed's legal there." Steve chuckled. "Yeah, I reckon you're right. But you know me, Brother Keith. She's like a sister to me, so I worry." "Sister?" Marty asked with a spark of mischief in his blue eyes. "That what they call it down in Atlanta?" Keith and Marty enjoyed a good laugh at this, and Steve felt his face burn like fire. "I don't know what y'all are talking about." "That's right, Ezra. I forgot about your Atlanta girl," Marty interrupted, the humor still smeared across his rugged face. "Where's she at anyway?" Steve snorted. "She hates it up here. But it was awfully cultural for her to have a feller who can speak Cherokee. Don't reckon she will for much longer." "Trouble in paradise, little brother?" Keith asked. "Never was much of a paradise, truth be told," Steve answered. "What else, Stevie?" Marty asked more seriously. "What do you mean? You know what, Ezra." Steve sucked down the rest of his cigarette and snuffed it out on the bottom of his boot. When he lifted his head again, he could feel the weight of his brother's stares and the concern behind them. He felt a fleeting guilt despite years of his brothers and mother assuring him he had no need to feel guilty, just careful, mindful. Remembering this, he took a deep breath and faced the onslaught. "Ever since I took the section editor gig, it's gotten worse." "Spells?" Keith asked. Steve nodded. "I had one at work the other day, right in front of one of my writers." "Did you pass out?" Marty asked with a tone of alarm. "Almost," Steve answered, "but I managed to keep on top of it this time." "This time," Marty said darkly. "You might not be able to next time, Ezra." "Yeah, I know." "That why you're here?" Keith asked. "Partly. I'd made up my mind before the spell hit me, but I was dead set after Lena made me go to a hipster dinner party."
The humanity in your work is the most enchanting to me to hear. And to watch you stress the read, and glad I'm sitting across the room, is a beauty to behold. So I cannot thank you enough for bringing this unique brand of the South, this intelligent yet still relaxed air of the South to the NPR and WUTC.
That's what I try to do, Cliff. As I have and I probably said this even on this show before, but it drives me insane when people think that you're an idiot if you have an accent. And that's what I really try to work against, even like through everything, but particularly in my fiction.
Yes.
So.
Oh, yeah. And now you also do some editing. How can people find out how to get a hold of your work and maybe even employ you for your services in that department?
Okay, well, as Cliff said, I am an editor. I'm very meticulous, so if you don't want to have your feelings hurt, don't hire me. But if you really are serious and you want a good editor who's going to tell you the truth, you can email me at javerysce@gmail.com.
Jennifer, I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you.
And see you next time.
All right.
And now we turn our show in a different direction. And with this guest, Mr. Luke Johnson, who I met roughly 2 years ago, we're going to take the literary mind away from the book alone and to a platform much bigger. And that's the Noetic Learning Program. How you doing, Luke?
Doing fantastic. But if you're going to be addressing me formally, you might as well call me Dr. Luke Johnson.
I'm sorry, you did graduate from the University of Georgia with a doctoral in being awesome, correct?
Philosophy, to be precise.
Okay, well, see, it's synonymous.
Yeah.
What really sparked your passion to build Noetic?
Oh, man. Well, so many different things. To begin with, I had gotten into this circuitous sort of routine of teaching the same subjects over and over and over again. And me personally, my long-term memory storage is not so great. And so I thought it was repetitious and unnecessary to do that when we could offload a lot of that material into storage bases on the internet. And then if we could do that, we could free up teachers and scholars to teach more things that they were passionate about and therefore have some sort of contagious zeal for the things that they were talking about to their students so they wouldn't just be somnambulating through introductory barn classes, and they could really exemplify the passion for the subject matter.
And it started off focused on philosophy, correct?
Yeah, but I realized that was a real narrow niche, and I realized that if it was going to be successful, I had to expand. Now, I'm a finite human being, and I can't know everything, so ultimately, when I realized the extent of my limitations, I had to open it up, and it was going to be something that we're going to have to crowdsource through institutions, retired professors and educators, and then just the general autodidact who has a story to share about their own studies and research. So we're still figuring out a process on how to peer review all the material, but I think that will all come in time. I oftentimes comforted by like what Wikipedia was 10 years ago, and now how it's like the standard. It's like the first place people go to look for information now. Mm-hmm. But 10 years ago, it was ridiculed and mocked. So I imagine there'll be some growing pains at first. But, if I look into the future 10 years, it looks pretty bright.
I can't agree more. It's been a learning process for me and the shows that I've done with you on poetry and realizing how little I knew. And at the same time, that there was this rejuvenation in my love for this writing that I do by teaching. And that goes to another passion of mine is just to allow more people to realize that poetry and literature in general is not this scary, distant thing, this lurking, complicated monster that folks falsely believe that it is. What are the other subjects that you now cover?
Well, the lessons are primarily focused around philosophy, literature, but these are broadly construed, right? Within philosophy, you have everything from studying theoretical physics to the ethics of bioengineering to dystopian novels. And then within poetry, you yourself know about the different ways that you can splay open the discipline of poetry. But I will have to say, I want to go back to what you just said about your talents. Over and over and over again, the feedback I get from individuals is how many people you inspire with your poetry lessons on Noetic, because you are so charismatic and you do make it leap off the page. That is, and I've told you this many times. Maybe it's been a little while since I told you, but you ought to know that. That's the feedback I get.
I didn't know you were going to say that, man. I'm going to cry like I'm on Oprah. But thank you so much for showing my vulnerable side, Luke. No, it's been, without trying to drag out, this big hug, it is a blessing to be able to be a part of something much bigger than myself and allows me a room to grow. And then the critical feedback that you give is not critical in the sense of being negative, but pushing me to be better at what I do. And I just cannot thank you enough for that.
Oh man, you know the way I look at it is it's like what we're doing right now. We're sitting across each other in a room or whatever, but I look at intellectual growth much like a tennis match. And I love working with you because it pushes me, and we get better together, right? Mm-hmm. Like some games you're gonna beat the snot out of me, and some games I might be a little bit more, but we get elevated in that process. So then when we go out into our diverse walks of life, we're so much better for it, right? And then I don't know, personally, I mean, I've grown so much from doing the poetry lessons from you. People are like, how does he know that stuff? And I'm like, I got this friend Cliff, and he taught me everything I know. But they think, they don't understand that I have all this outside help by working with all these different intellectuals and assembling and curating all the material. I mean, it's just pushed me in so many directions. And if I had any advice, I don't know if this is the sort of forum for that, for anyone who's trying to grow as an intellectual, just do things that make you feel uncomfortable. Constantly push yourself in directions. So if you're a good singles player, if we're going to keep with the analogy, play doubles or do Canadian doubles or like put some junk on the ball. You know what I'm saying? Like constantly make yourself uncomfortable. Even if you totally fail, you'll eventually become a better intellectual, a better scholar, and to keep the analogy, a better player.
Look, tell us how we can find Noetic.
You can go to the App Store on your iPhone and whatever it is on Droid. I believe Google Play is what they have. And you can download Noetic, and you can get version 1.0 there. Now, we're about to launch the second iteration of Noetic, which is this larger idea of it being sort of the synthesis between iTunes U, Wikipedia, and Facebook. That's essentially kind of what the model that we're going for here. It's, so we're going to push that very soon. I just got finished doing the explanatory video, which you are featured prominently in, and I want to thank you for the nice words that you said in it. So you'll be able to see Cliff in the flesh and have him say some nice things about it. So I should be pushing that within, I don't know, maybe a week or two. And then what I'm probably going to be doing, and you can go to noetic-online.com and you can try the web browser version of it. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to most likely be going around to different colleges and institutions trying to encourage individuals and places of learning to sign up and create accounts and to upload their lessons there. And ultimately, the goal is to be able to give everyone a college education, whether they're in the mountains of Appalachia or they're in Africa somewhere, so long as they have like a smartphone and an internet connection.
Right.
It's just a wonderful time that we live in. Everyone can have a Library of Alexandria now.
Yes, it's a library at your fingertips.
Yeah, that is what you said in it. I think I stole that from you.
You can have it. That's not stealing.
Yeah.
It's not, man. I cannot thank you enough. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I would just say for anybody who is listening, who is a fan of what we're doing over at Noetic and has appreciated the lessons that Cliff has done, that you really ought to check out his original poetry. Because he's a pretty inspired guy, and there's really not any drop off. So I would highly recommend that. And I don't know, I'm always interested in positive feedback or negative feedback, whatever. That's the only way to grow. I got to make myself uncomfortable. So if you want to write me at philosophyluke@gmail.com and let me know what's working and what's not. Go for it. Go for it. You can't offend me. I've been putting myself out there in this way. I've been unloaded on so many times. Just let me have it, good and bad.
We'll do that, man. Thank you so much for coming out today, man.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
All right, brother. And as we near the end of this episode of Dante's Old South, we have Mrs. Burnett Sherman. And the first time I wouldn't say heard her read, experienced her read, I was worried I'd made her uncomfortable when, again, I came up like a typhoon wrapped in a hurricane, sweating profusely, and telling her, I've got this great group of people, and you've got to be in it. And she just calmly smiled and said, well, let me think about it. And thank God, when she did, she agreed to come aboard. How are you today, Burnett?
I am fabulous. Thank you so much.
Now, I know that you have been busy this year. And so tell us what you've been working on and what's the most exciting parts about it.
So I have been busy. It's been a great year and really kind of started nearly 2 years ago. But in that time, I've put out Chosen, a novel, which I'm going to read a little bit from today, a couple of novellas, and some inspiration, a poetry book, and even my first musical single. So I've been staying busy. The thing I'm most excited about, though, is the music project, because it was the first time I'd ever done a recording. And it was fun. I'd love to do more of that. Yeah.
And you've released some of that, haven't you?
So everything I talked about is available to the world. It's available to the world. All of the books are on Amazon. The music is available to stream, and it's called Walk in Peace, Love and Heal the World. And it is available to stream. It's available on Amazon, iTunes, Google, you name it. It's there.
I don't know if busy or furiously hectic is what we should go with, but the calm you're
Or
able
crazy.
to bring to projects, it does. No, yes, I am. That's quite the crazy fits perfectly. But what you bring to your readings is a passion and it's a theatrics without melodrama. And is it something that you have naturally come into, or have you evolved with it, or is it, how do you keep yourself on your toes?
I've always liked the stage, drama. You know, it's been a long time since I've really been on it. You know, high school's a long time ago. But I've liked performing. You know, I was Miss Black Georgia when I was younger and Miss Black International, and I've done singing performances. So I like the stage and I like to perform, and poetry is another way of performing.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
So with all this going on, how's this going to evolve in the next year or so?
Well, 2018 is going to be fabulous. I'm just going to call that out right now. And I'm hoping I can get another poetry book out or an expanded one. Hopefully get some inspirational books out that I'm working on, some projects on that side for my metaphysical, spiritual aspect. And then crossing my fingers, I can get the second book of Chosen out sometime in the next year to year and a half.
It makes me feel better, and I don't feel so crazy when I have somebody else who's doing so much and I see them smile. So there's hope. There's hope that I can hang on to. If people want to connect with you or reach out and touch base with you and maybe ask you questions, how can they do that?
Well, the first place you can go, I am on the Southern Collective Experience website, and I also have my own domain name, BurnettSherman.com, has everything that I do pretty much. And then for my writing and my other creative works, Creative Core, that's Creative Core, C-O-R-E, HS.com. And that HS is for heart and soul. And so that's CreativeCoreHS.com. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Burnett Sherman. Google me, you'll find me. And I'd love for you to follow and connect and let me know what you think.
Well, let's let the whole world that wants to tune in at WUTC hear some of this book that you're writing.
All right. So I'm going to read a snippet from the middle. And it's not too long. Cliff knows I can go long sometimes with my writing. But if I'm going to just read a snippet. And again, this is from Chosen. It's a paranormal sci-fi dystopian novel. If you're looking for it, it's under A. Burnett. Stella pushed the door and it clicked and opened. A faint white light flickered unpredictably as this door swung in. They found themselves standing at the top of a wide landing, on either side of which were steps. Both sets of steps led into darkness. Stephen tapped on his tablet and recorded the location. It wasn't a check, but he wanted to precisely identify where it was, given the lack of detail on the blueprints. Do you hear that? Sounds like something down there. I'm staying right here. But I can record from here, Stella whispered. She grabbed the handrail and leaned her other hand over the center of the stairwell to get it closer to the sound. What was under her hand felt odd, scratchy. It should have been smooth metal. Stella shined her light on the rail. Long scratches crossed the rail going from right to left before fading. She moved her light to another section. She could see the same type of scratches start again right where the staircase began to wind down. Stephen, shine your light on your side. Do you have long scratches there too? She followed the scratches with her fingertips. They could be fingernails, but that would require very sharp, strong nails. Yes, they're on this side too. What do you think they are? He traced his fingers along the path, taking a step down the stairs. Don't go down there. We don't know where these stairs go, Stephen, Stella said, grabbing his shirt. It's a staircase on the ark. It's probably a boring science lab. With those sounds, I doubt it, Stephen. I'm still recording, so be quiet for a minute. Stephen stood quietly, his fingers still running over the scratches. He let his fingernails move across them. They weren't evenly spaced or sized. They weren't always straight. They were at different angles, almost as if some metal had been dragged along them for a short burst before being lifted.
And I have to bring myself back again. It's the presentation. There's so much to it, and you've aced it in spades. I mean, you have. There's nothing better in a reading than to see people go, no, don't stop, don't stop. And you bring it to the table every single time.
Thank you.
I cannot thank you enough for being on the show.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. This is a pleasure of mine.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And now, the returning guest, Mr. Shane Etter. How are you doing, brother?
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you very much.
What's going on in your world, man?
Man, all kinds of things. Finished my, have to count, 6th novel about 3 weeks ago. Should be out in December. That's called A Brain in Third Person Squared. And that's just me being clever because it's the sequel to my fourth novel about a serial killer called A Brain in Third Person. So I thought the second just ought to be called Brain in Third Person Squared.
I love it. I love it, man.
Thank you.
And your range goes from the supernatural to the very concrete world of gangs and gang violence. How do you manage so many different genres of writing so well?
Well, thank you for saying I do it well, but I think I have left the supernatural behind and only concentrating on mainstream thrillers, more serial killers, rival drug gangs in New York City, things like that. So
The American pastimes. That's what you're into.
Or as I tell people all the time, they say, "What are you writing?" I say, serial killers, drug gangs, everyday stuff.
And it's the ability to have someone laugh at that. That's the pure genius behind it, man.
Thank you.
In watching you read, you bring an earthy tone to what it is you put on paper. So what are you going to read from today?
A War in the Bronx. It's about rival drug gangs in New York City, but I'm starting on the first page with an introduction to my two main plainclothes detectives. I'm introducing one on each page.
Well, let's hear it, brother.
Detective second grade John Maloney had his ever-present copy of the Daily News clenched under his arm as he strode along Simpson Street toward the front doors of the precinct made famous in film and literature as Fort Apache, the Bronx, written by the great novelist, screenwriter, and Hollywood director Haywood Gould. Maloney's pace told anyone watching he was on a mission, head down, hands in his overcoat pockets, the collar of the coat turned up against the early morning chill. Pregnant gray clouds were threatening to dump a miserable load of snow on the city. Some people walked slowly in the cold, the near-freezing temperatures making it too painful to rush. In truth, the cold made Maloney move faster. With his quick pace, even in the frigid early morning weather, he worked up a light sweat. He was a New Yorker to his bones. As Mayor Ed Koch once said, New Yorkers walk faster, talk faster, think faster. Even though through the thick skin of his cheek, the chill pained the bad molar Maloney needed to have filled. He'd have to call his dentist, the one he'd seen since he was a kid. The man was still in the same Central Park East office Johnny had visited as a child. The coat he wore was a knockoff, a copy of a Burberry, khaki-colored with camel check tartan plaid lining. He couldn't afford the genuine article on a New York City police detective's salary, and fortunately, with his average build, he didn't require an even more expensive bespoke version, which was way out of the question. With his dark hair, untouched by gray as it was, and every man's size, if anyone were paying attention, they'd think he were 10 years younger than his actual 35, and almost pretty. They'd never suspect he was an NYPD veteran detective of 10 years. He told himself the mustache he cultivated was just to make himself look like a kid, a young, overly pretty kid. The other detectives gave him too much crap about his looks, and women wished he were single. The 9-foot-tall double doors creaked noisily, divulging their age as he strained to open one against the wind. The once beautiful wood entrance entering the home of all Bronx detectives was stained with the grime, dirt, soot, and exhaust from decades in the elements and rough to the touch from the filth. The desk sergeant greeted him with a make-believe scowl from behind his eyrie. The immense elevated desk overlooking everything and everyone to own his watch. "Good morning, Sergeant Cabrera," Maloney greeted loudly, feigning enthusiasm that he didn't mean and that didn't fool the sergeant. "Morning, Maloney. What are you grinning about?" "Not grinning, Sergeant. Just happy to be here." "Well, your buddy Musso's turning over a new leaf. Got in early. Get in there and hit the streets." "Yes, Sergeant."
It takes the attention in a graceful way, which you do. And when I listen to you, it's every time you lose yourself. And it's the casual use of sophistication and the laid-back reality of what conversations are actually like between two people. And whether it's contentious or it takes on a more humorous tone, you're able to kind of balance that together, with a real grace.
Well, you're very kind. Hope I take the best of everybody, every writer I know around me, and steal it, not copy. I never copy anything, but every book has been written. Every novel has been written. There are no new novels out there, so we all have to steal from one another.
I don't think there's any aside you throw in that's not fascinating, Shane. That you have a gift, brother.
Well, you're too kind. If anything, like I say, I'm a product of everyone around me. We'll just leave that.
And we'll leave it right there, man. I cannot thank you enough for coming out.
Thank you very much.
All right. I cannot thank you enough for tuning in for another episode of Dante's Old South through WUTC and NPR. My books, Athena Departs, Gospel of a Man Apart, and Exiles of Eden, published by Kudzu Leaf Press, will be available in the next 2 weeks. And if you check my website, cliffbrooks.com or the southerncollectiveexperience.com, you can find tour dates, email me directly, and be able to buy it from all places and homes where books are sold. So we'll close this evening with a poem from my first book, The Draw of Broken Eyes and Whirling Metaphysics, with the melody and soul played by Mr. D.L. Yancey II. Bloodshot on a moon-hung highway, I wear my soul like a chore. This solid 67 Impala rolls with mellow wheels and hauls me home to Crawford. I can't seem to shake the line, ain't nobody's fault but mine. I feel like a prophet with smoke in his eyes, seeing rhyme that burns like brimstone. It's the spell of her love letters on the back seat beneath John Lee Hooker's guitar. I am bewitched. I have come unstitched, and a rosary swings from my rearview mirror. Nighttime is a shade of day. It passes. This isn't the Blues Cafe in Smyrna where I read John Agard poems while my last romance got a headstone. Sitting there, I first heard the line, ain't nobody's fault but mine. This lady says she'll forgive me, inviting these bones back for safekeeping. Car grumbling, trembling apart, trees eaten to my periphery. For months, this man has been a wasteland. I haven't shaved in 5 days. And a shower wouldn't kill me. Thank you, and live your life swell.